Neurodiversity. Some Thoughts by David Bailey. So, what we're going to cover in this presentation is the origin and definition of neurodiversity, how societal change, especially in the workplace and in education, has had an impact on neurodiverse people. We're going to do some examples of the neurodiverse experiences, what common features there are. And we'll do a bit of work on empathy and empathy exercise. Then we'll go on to do some examples of 8 different neurodiverse conditions, and then do a matching exercise where you look at how people with different experiences fit the profile of different neurodiversities. Then there's a problem-solving workshop where you can look at different scenarios and solve those or give solutions. And finally, we want to look at the resistance to some problems, resistance to identification. Not everybody wants to be thought of as having a neurodiverse condition. So in front of you now is a picture of Judy Singer. Judy Singer is the person, when she was at university studying, she came up with this idea, this term neurodiversity. And her idea was to combine the ideas of the mind with the concept of a respect for differences in how people's minds work. And I'll go over that a little bit afterwards, but let's first watch Judy explaining this herself.
Our next brave speaker this evening is Dr. Judy Singer. Judy is an Australian sociologist, a writer, a public speaker, and a disability activist. She is internationally recognised as being the pioneer of the global neurodiversity movement. In fact, she coined the term neurodiversity. Many of us owe her a great gratitude for bringing to the forefront of her work something that empowers millions.
Your work towards the neurodiversity movement, so people don't know that I mentioned before she's the originator of the term neurodiversity. How did your own struggles and your background lead you to pioneering this movement? And maybe we can start by defining what neurodiversity actually is.
Oh, okay, so I've got to apologise for this horrible term that nobody quite understands. And I have to say that I actually just had an aha moment and thought, oh, what a perfect word, never thinking twice about what it even meant. And it was a perfect word for the times because it combined the fashions of the time, which was the rise of neuroscience over psychology. People were fed up with paying fortunes for therapy and not changing. Neuroscience seemed to improve. And the green movement, diversity as a desirable thing for any ecosystem, and I thought, why not put them together? Actually, I didn't think that, but obviously deep down in my intuition, it was like, yep, it just fits the times. So what does it mean? It means, well, it's a fancy word for all humanity, but don't tell anyone that because... But what it doesn't mean is it's not a disability. So I noticed that when what they wrote about me, that I was going to talk about my neurodiversity, and I've got a very bad case of neurodiversity. No, it's like, you know, Joey the kangaroo's got a bad case of biodiversity. No, it doesn't mean disability. But basically, I didn't define it, but I said what it was for. I wanted to name a social movement for in the mould of the women's liberation movement and the gay liberation movement, for people who were neurological outsiders or neurological minorities, as I prefer to call them now. And the other, that was to name the movement, and the other thing was to add to intersectionality, because in those days, disability was just physical, intellectual, and mental illness, and that wasn't us. We just didn't belong. We were bunched into mental illness or weird or oddballs or eggheads. And it also, so I went to university at the time. Tell me if I'm going off the topic.
Yeah,
I went to university at the time, and I was searching for what is it that my mother had, because I knew there was something. And meanwhile, I had my daughter, and she was reminding me of my mother, and I thought, oh my God, it's a hereditary disability. What is it? So I was searching around at university, and I stumbled on disability studies. It just totally blew my mind. And I pursued it, and I kept looking. And I ended up doing an honours degree at UTS. And I did it on autistics communicating in cyberspace. And I called it the birth of something like the evolution of a new social movement based on neurological diversity. And then I just put them together because it was catchy.
So you can see that this concept of neurological differences such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and other cognitive conditions are what we call natural variations of the human brain. These differences, really, it's best not to view them as disorders that need to be fixed. There's something permanent, but also something important and valuable in them. Neurodiversity emphasizes the idea that diverse neurological characteristics contribute to the richness of human society and culture. It's not physical disability, not an intellectual disability, and it's not about mental illness. That's what Judy Singer was getting at. She wanted a name of a social movement. That's what she's looking for. So now I think it's worth having a look at neurological versus psychological conditions and emphases. Now, as you look at these, I'll go down and read them for you first, I think, and then we can it helps people concentrate. So, neurological versus psychological. Neurological focuses on the physical brain and nervous system. It examines the biological and neurological underpinnings of behavior. It deals with neuroanatomy, neurotransmitters, and brain activity. And it's often related to neurological conditions, brain injuries, and genetics. And it impacts on individuals' functioning and can be relatively permanent. But it's not the domain that we're working in. We're trying to relate our dealing with people with autism, dyslexia, etc., in the psychological domain. So we need to be very careful to think what we're doing. So psychological encompasses cognitive, emotional, and behavioral dimensions. It explores the influence of environment, society, and culture on behavior. It includes psychological states, beliefs, and learned behaviors. And it's amenable to interventions like therapy, counseling, behavioral modification, if we want to do that. And it focuses on the malleability and adaptability of human psychology, the idea that people can change even if their physical situation stays the same. So what we find is that neurodiversity is a spectrum. There's no one size fits all of what it means to be neurodiverse. Some people with neurodiverse conditions may need significant support to function in everyday life, while others may only need minor accommodations. And we'll also see that sometimes throughout our lives these vary as well. It's not to be thought of as a bad thing, it's simply a different way of thinking and processing information. And I want to stress this a lot. People with neurodiverse conditions often have unique strengths and talents that can be valuable in the workplace and other areas of life. Now, the decision of whether or not to treat a neurodiverse condition, whether to try and change it or whether just to manage it, is a personal one, and that should be made by the individual or their family in consultation with a doctor or a therapist. There's also no statistical cutoff point for neurodiverse conditions. So it is a continuum, and some people will feel neurodiverse and some people won't, and we have to work with that. In some ways, society is much better than it was. It's less rigid about all kinds of diversity and difference now. There's not so much intolerance towards people with different religions, different sexual preferences, different lifestyle choices, what we wear. So in that way, that's a very good thing. But the workplace has changed in a way where specialization has finished. Jobs used to have a very narrow focus, often anyway, allowing the employee to become an expert in a very, very specific task. So, for example, when I started working retail 30 years ago, I had a job. My job was to fill jobs in the stockroom, and that's what I did. I did it all day, every day. Contemporary jobs, mind you, they frequently require employees to perform a variety of tasks, often at the same time, and we all have this, and it's problematic in different ways for us. So in the same role I had 30 years ago, now I would be expected to shop floor at 10:30, 11:30, collecting trolleys, check out at 12 o'clock, back to security in the evening. All these different jobs will be something that I would have to do. So that is a big change. So we all know, we've all been through this, haven't we? These diverse responsibilities. Today's employees are often expected to handle multiple roles in the same position, such as customer service, restocking, checkout, security. We print our own material, and with a tutor it's the same. We design our resources, we make our lesson plans, we deal with enrollments and things like that. So we all end up doing lots of different jobs. Many roles now do involve strong interpersonal skills. So there's a lot of communication with customers and colleagues and superiors. Now, while a lot of this is online, and that can be easier for some people who've got neurodiversity issues, it seems to be more. There's more communication, and people are expected to switch between tasks and adapt to changing situations very quickly. So those repetitive jobs have disappeared. And also, proficiency with various digital tools and technologies is often assumed, and that won't be natural for some people. They may, if you move from a laptop to a computer to a tablet, all those might seem different to them. Well, that was a little bit. That's a bit of almost a negative spin on that, and it wasn't intended to be. Because all I wanted to do is to come away from here thinking we can help these people who are neurodiverse. We can find places for them. We can teach them how to learn and manage in an environment, a mainstream environment, if you like. And I thought it would be useful to look at some examples of neurodiversity friendly employers. That's a bit of a handful, but so I'll just read through these and talk you through them. So you've got DELL. DELL has established a neurodiversity hiring program in the UK aimed at recruiting individuals on the autistic spectrum for various roles within the company. They provide a supportive and inclusive environment for neurodiverse employees. And let's have a look at that.
DELL implemented the autism hiring program to take advantage of an untapped talent pool. We saw that individuals on the autism spectrum are 80 to 90% underemployed. With a tight labor market, especially in the technology industry, we thought if we don't rethink the way we're attracting talent and don't consider new ideas and be more innovative in the space, we're missing the boat on talent.
The experience of joining DELL has impacted my life in many ways. It gave me a solid foundation to work on and let me communicate and connect with co-workers that I can talk to on an intellectual basis.
Well, it's definitely impacted my life as far as being able to support my family, especially since I had gotten married fairly recently and I just had a new baby. 6 weeks ago, which definitely helps to be employed.
We have definitely seen a business impact from the autism hiring program. I think that it's a couple of different layers of how it's impacted our business. From a team environment perspective, our team is closer together, our team is more focused, our team has a better way of doing things than we had done prior to the program participation.
After fiddling around with some existing test code that more experienced employees have written, I was able to write some code in Java to automate some of the testing that we had to do for the user interface for one of Dell's products.
Some of the things that I did was I provided new ways of thinking to my team and implemented new technologies that help accelerate our team's business process.
I think in terms of our overall results to our business partners, they've seen a tremendous amount of scale that has been brought to the forefront. We're automating things better than we ever have before, and it's freeing up valuable time that we can spend understanding what our business partners' problems are and working to craft solutions to help them and, at the end of the day, the Dell EMC customers.
We had a really good group of candidates, and when they came in and started working with the different business units, they just hit the ground running. They were eager to learn and eager to try new things.
Also, you've got GCHQ, which is one of the most crucial departments for the security of the United Kingdom at the moment. It's known for its commitment to neurodiversity and actively seeks neurodiverse talent for various roles, including cybersecurity and intelligence analysis. They run a neurodiversity network and provide accommodations for neurodiverse employees. And they don't let the fact that they have to deal with security to do that. So one of the most sensitive places in the country, neurodiverse people are welcome and seen to have talents. Microsoft has a strong focus on diversity and inclusion, including neurodiversity. They have a program called Microsoft Neurodiversity Hiring Program, which aims to hire individuals on the autism spectrum. Microsoft, it provides tailored support and accommodations to help neurodiverse employees succeed in their roles. Financial companies. So, for example, JP Morgan Chase, it's international, but in their London office, they've been involved in neurodiversity initiatives, and they've got a neurodiversity hiring program in their London office. So they aim to hire individuals with conditions such as autism and offer training and support to ensure their success in the workplace. And finally, Goldman Sachs. One of my learners, but I learned in many other people's classes as well, this learner is, his daughter is dyslexic, and she works for Goldman Sachs. And there are many examples of how the Autism at Work program in their London office, and it seeks to employ individuals on the autism spectrum and provide with support and adjustments. So there's a lot going on here. Things are moving forward. So let's have a look at some of these challenges for neurodiverse individuals, and these are unlikely to apply to everybody, and one or two might apply to a person. Now let's have a look. You've got sensory overload, which is when the person might struggle with the sensory overload caused by a busy and dynamic work environment, and a classroom environment, if you like, as well. Our classrooms can get hectic and busy, and we want people to participate, but sometimes that is difficult for them. There are the task switching difficulties. So our lessons are meant to have lots of different short activities in them, but sometimes that task switching has to be sort of carefully managed so there's not too much of it. So task switching difficulties can be overwhelming for individuals who excel in focused single task scenarios. There's things to do with communication challenges, interacting with different people and contexts. That could pose communication difficulties for those with social or communication related conditions. Increased stress. So the pressure to perform a range of tasks efficiently can increase stress and anxiety, and it impacts their overall well-being. So stress, if you see stress in a person with a condition, you'll notice that the aspects of that condition will get worse. Some jobs will cause a lack of deep focus as well. So they may involve that deep focus, but someone will come along and say, can I help you? Can you help me with this? And then they can't get back into it. And that's why sometimes modern offices and I walk down to that office downstairs, it could be very tricky for someone with disability, with a neurodiverse condition, to find that focus. This is one for a dyslexic person, but other people as well. Frequent context shifts might hinder memory and learning retention for those who have conditions affecting their cognitive flexibility. Okay, now, one thing that's very important for people who have neurodiverse conditions is sometimes they think it's only them. So, for example, if I give my own example with dyspraxia, dyspraxic people are prone to losing things, being disorganized. And it's always astonishing to us when somebody who's not neurodiverse has that experience. And it's very important that you're able to share that and say, it does happen to me sometimes. Not all the time, but occasionally we all have these experiences. So what I'd like you to do is to sit in a group or on your own if you're doing this by yourself, and think about a time when these things have affected you, a time when you've had sensory overload, or you've had some task switching difficulties, communication challenges, when you've had increased stress, when it's been hard for you to focus on something, when you've had memory difficulties. And by thinking about how you manage that, you'll get a clue as how to help the neurodiverse person manage that. What I find with dyslexic people is they need to be taught explicitly what we almost know implicitly. So talk together about when we've had one of these experiences: sensory overload, task switching difficulty, communication challenge, increased stress, a lack of deep focus, or learning and memory issues. And what caused it, how you managed that, and how that made you feel. Okay, so here are some definitions of different neurodiversity conditions, states, or whatever. So we have autism spectrum disorder. You might also see autism or autistic spectrum disorder or ASD. Asperger's is a specific variety of autism, but autism is a neurological development disorder, and maybe people don't want to call it that. Sometimes it just means a difference of brain, characterized by challenges in social interaction, communication difficulties, presence of maybe repetitive behaviors. Not all these apply to everybody, as I can testify from people I know. Individuals with autism may have a wide range of abilities and strengths, and they may perceive the world in unique ways. So there you go, that's autism. Pathological demand avoidance. Now, PDA is often considered a part of the autism spectrum, and it involves an extreme avoidance of everyday demands and expectations. Individuals with PDA may struggle with traditional approaches to instruction. So that's a contradiction to those people who might have preferred that original way of being instructed, who prefer a rigid and formal way. Some people don't respond to that. We've got attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and you can have hyperactivity without the attention deficit, and you can have the attention deficit without the hyperactivity, but they're usually referred to together. It's characterized by difficulty with attention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. It can affect the individual's ability to focus and regulate their behavior. Fortunately, these things They don't get cured, but people manage them as they get older to a greater or lesser extent. Dysgraphia, that's a specific learning difficulty that affects writing abilities. People with dysgraphia may have trouble with handwriting. They might also struggle with spelling and organising their thoughts on paper. Okay, moving on to Tourette syndrome. This is one that is difficult in the classroom, and we'll see. You can come up with your ideas of how to manage this later. But Tourette syndrome is a neurological condition characterized by involuntary tics and vocalizations. So these tics can range from simple movements to more complex actions and phrases. So calling out different things at inappropriate times, or yeah, it generally, though, it's less obvious than that. It's usually like tics or jumps and shudders and that kind of thing. This one is new to me, but I thought I would put it in. I thought it was interesting. It's called giftedness and twice exceptionality. These are people who are very clever and very brilliant, but also have some unique needs, maybe. Some gifted individuals also have learning difficulties and other condition, which is known as twice exceptionality. So they're not just good, they're exceptional. But that brings with it a whole nother layer of frustration when they can't achieve what they want to. We've got dyslexia, which is a very specific learning disability that primarily affects reading and language related skills. In England, in English, especially spelling. People with dyslexia may struggle with accurate and fluent word recognition, making reading a challenging process. And it has to be said, most dyslexic people, as they reach adulthood, do develop strategies. And finally, we'll have dyspraxia, which is developmental coordination disorder. Dyspraxia involves challenges with motor coordination skills, spatial awareness. Individuals with dyspraxia may struggle with tasks like tying shoelaces and handwriting, that kind of thing. Okay, now the two parts to this really. The minor part, in a way, is seeing if you can work out from the scenario what particular neurodiverse situation we're looking at. The second and more important part is for you to put in place some suggestions and modifications. I hope I have chosen things that are manageable. So there shouldn't be anybody here who you don't think you would be able to help. So let's read through each of these different scenarios in turn. So in scenario one, you've got an ESOL class at Oldham Lifelong Learning. Ahmed, a male student, consistently avoids eye contact and prefers working independently. He may find it challenging to engage in group discussions due to difficulties with verbal communications, and he has a strong preference for routine, and often that leads to isolation in the classroom. So what are you going to do for Ahmed, and what's his thing? Scenario two, you've got a mathematics class at Oldham Lifelong Learning. Sarah, a female student. She struggles to sit still, frequently fidgets and interrupts the tutor and the peers with unrelated questions. Her restlessness disrupts the class, making it difficult for both her and her classmates to concentrate on the lesson. Let's try scenario three. This time we've got Carol. She's a female student from Poland, and she faces challenges in reading technical terms in the textbooks, and she misspells words when searching online, causing her to lag behind in coursework. And Carol mentions that she also has some problems like this when she's working in Polish as well. Scenario four, we've got a painting class at Oldham Lifelong Learning, and Liam, who really has been looking forward to painting, finds it challenging to control the paintbrush due to difficulty with his fine motor skills. It's frustrating for him as he strives to create detailed artwork, and that's impacting on his overall artistic experience. So let's look at scenario 5. You've got Charity. She's a female student, great with children. She's had some work experience, but she's struggling with her handwriting and organising thoughts on paper when taking notes. And this affects her ability to review and study effectively, and it's adding stress to her academic journey. Scenario 6. So we're back to an ESOL class. We've got Daniel, a male student. Occasionally, he exhibits these vocal tics, such as throat clearing and soft sounds, which can be distracting for both him and his peers. And sometimes this is a bit uncomfortable in the classroom. What is the condition? What are we going to do to help him? Scenario 7. Back in maths, we've got Maya, and she's a female student, and she gets anxious and resistant when given challenging topics, especially if she gets things wrong. So she may refuse to engage with material, and that disrupts things and makes it hard for her to progress. And finally, in the art class, we've got Ethan. He's got very good skills. He's gifted, but he makes his integrated artwork, but he doesn't know how to explain what he's doing. And he gets very frustrated when he can't explain what this vision means. So what is Ethan's situation? Okay, let's have some answers, suggestions. Yeah, so Ahmed, autism spectrum disorder, ASD. Some potential adjustments which you've probably got is a structured, quiet space, offer him written assignments and give him lots of visual aids to use. Scenario 2, the Sarah now is ADHD. So maybe she could do with some short breaks, some clear instructions, lots of interactive teaching. Scenario 3, this is dyslexia. Tricky to find sometimes in people if they've got English as a second language, but potential adjustments include assisted technology, text-to-speech tools, and extra time for reading assignments. 4, we have got Liam with his dyspraxia. So maybe his coordination is a problem. Maybe offer him adaptive tools, some techniques to support his fine motor skills. Maybe encourage him to try a different form of art, different sort of branch, maybe. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So moving on to scenario 5, you've got dysgraphia. I think there's some overlap between dyslexia and dysgraphia. So if you put dyslexia, dysgraphia, the whole point of this exercise is not the condition, it's how we support. So again, note-taking alternatives, digital tools, printed materials. Daniel, in some ways, this is the hardest one. I'm sure you all picked this was Tourette's syndrome. What can we do? Create the supportive environment, offer breaks, explain to other people, make sure that others understand what's going on. 7, that is a tricky one, isn't it? We've got Maya. What can we do to help her? Maybe it's pathological demand avoidance, so it's very difficult because whatever you do, you'll have to work on strategies. Maya's managed to get to your class. She obviously, you don't know, she's obviously achieved some success in life. So we have to try and work on that somehow. And finally, number 8. This is Ethan with his giftedness and twice exceptionality. So potential adjustments, maybe encouraging his artistic expression and supplementing verbal explanations with some visual ones. So some people have a resistance to being identified as dyslexic, autistic, ADHD, all these different conditions. Not everybody wants those. There's cultural beliefs around neurodiversity and learning differences that may discourage self-identification or seeking support. People are afraid of being labelled as different or facing discrimination or prejudice. I told you those stories of the big employers who welcome neurodiverse people, but that's not the case everywhere. So people sometimes try and cover this up. There's also a lack of awareness and understanding what it means to be having neurodiversity, what a learning difference. Previous negative experiences with labelling or diagnosis in their home country or community. So in some countries, especially if someone's over here for a short period of time and they're going back to a different country, going back with a diagnosis of something that's not recognised there might not be helpful. There's concerns about potential impacts on employment prospects or social integration, and also many people are taught to rely on themselves and be resilient and to stand up for themselves, and that may discourage some people from seeking help or support for these learning challenges. So that's the end of our presentation. Here's a few websites for you to check out. Feel free to message me if you've got any questions, suggestions. Suggestions are especially welcome, particularly if you've got experience or knowledge of things that I've spoken about, anything that might be incorrect or you think we need to focus on next time. Thank you. Bye.